once I'm done, everything's been said. So I've got two handouts, individual liberty and the proper role of government, and a little follow-up data in case you're interested. So originally, the title of this debate was intended to be The Limits of Liberty. And that was Paul's selection. So I said, the limits of liberty? Oh, you mean the proper role of tyranny? Is that what you mean, right? So as we approach April 15th, the high holy day of the Democrats and Socialists, I thought it would be useful to take a look at the role of government in society. We have a huge debt, $202 trillion in unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare coming up. The U.S. Senate hasn't passed a budget in over almost 3 years. And the state's deficit, California, it's between 6 and 8 billion annually. Meanwhile, the U.S. federal deficit daily in February was 8 billion a day. So you can see the government's having problems funding programs, and perhaps they've overpromised. 8 billion a year for California, that's our deficit, and you see how politically difficult it is to close that gap. 8 billion a day, federal, and there's no larger state than California to rely on to close that. Where are we going to get the money? So we have to make some adjustments, and that's why I'm here. My approach to government is that in a just and civil society, government is there to protect your liberties. It is not there to give you stuff. If it's giving you stuff, then it's not protecting your liberties, because it's giving you someone else's stuff. You have to make a choice. And no person is above another one. I know many people base their belief in individual freedom on a God-given right. I base it on an epistemological limitation. Did you like that? Yeah. Which is that since we don't know any one person is superior to another or beneath another one, we assume we're equals. There are 3 ways to obtain resources in society. I'm an economist, by the way, I teach here. We can steal from people, we can produce and trade, or we can rely on private charity. Those are the 3 ways. As a libertarian, I believe the government is there to protect your rights from plunder, force, theft. And the government is there to pave the roads, provide goods and services we use collectively. When I give the money to government, I expect something in return. I don't expect to get scammed. It's there to provide national defense from foreign invasion, and it's there to run the courts or enforce voluntary agreements in a market society. Government force is defensive force. It's not offensive force. So just government does not get involved in corporate welfare. Corporate welfare is tax money taken forcibly from consumers to bail out failed businesses that the consumers no longer want. So in a free market society, in a capitalist free market society, corporate welfare and bank bailouts are not part of that system. That would be government failure, and that's called crony capitalism. That's not free trade. That's forced trade, bailouts.
When are we going to get to the disagreement?
See, I'm a uniter, not a divider. I'm just bridging the gap. So when we talk about Marxism or the criticism of the ruling class, often they're talking about crony capitalism, business interests that are not keeping the revenue coming in by providing an honest, good product, but they've actually locked in their positions through protectionism and subsidies. And we can both agree that that is not a legitimate function of government, and that is not voluntary, peaceful economic activity. The government is not there to enslave you, so it should be preventing slavery. And finally, pollution is not a family value. When you pollute someone's backyard, are you taking care of your own trash, or are you throwing costs onto someone else and violating their property rights? Take care of your own trash. So pollution is not part of a free civil society. Government's there to prevent pollution, slavery, corporate welfare, not happening. We don't need a fundamental transformation of the society to correct injustices. We have an app for that. It's called the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. If someone steals from you, that's what the courts are for. Privileged wealth to me is when someone steals from you or gets a bailout from the government and should give that money back and just resign from banking. If we have slavery, we should provide restitution for slavery. In a free society, if you enslave someone, is that a voluntary agreement or is that a forced agreement? It's a forced trade, and you had your labor stolen. So you should compensate people for the theft of their labor. It was not a voluntary agreement. For me, the government is there to protect your rights and provide restitution. I know there's debate about restitution for slavery because we have many social programs, but anybody could access them. It wasn't targeted to people who actually had violations of their rights. And we need to target these things. So the people who actually benefited from slavery, the cotton industries, these are the industries you should pay back. And to me, I agree with the Marxists. That is what they talk about when they say privilege. It wasn't done through hard work and trade. They actually took someone's property. Right? We're together, right? So we're good, right? So, point 7, stop hating on the rich. Oh, by the way, when you use broad sweeping regulations to correct past injustices and historically disadvantaged groups, broad sweeping regulations, such as providing low-interest loans, mortgages to people who maybe can't afford them, that's going to do damage to other people, such as depositors, who will not get their money back. So you want to target people who have been wronged, but you shouldn't bring in these social engineering programs, because by correcting justice, you're just creating more injustice. We need to do this surgically. And what's happened is they have social engineered the mortgage market, and it's caused bad loans. I say, give anyone who has been enslaved $1 million, if I don't even think that's enough, 50 acres and a pickup truck. This guy was a former slave. He bought land in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, lost the deed to his land. This was in, I don't know the date, 18-something. He paid $225. The heirs of this former slave, they won that land back, worth $16 million. Excellent. Nice. Finally, the government does something right, restores people's property rights. Point 7. Oh, I forgot to add. If you think it's great to have these broad sweeping social engineering programs to undo past damages, you're no better than a warmonger who wants to carpet bomb a country but causes collateral damage to dead civilians. Point 7, stop hating on the rich, the 1%. Income inequality in many cases is just a price signal of the skills needed to become that, to have that career. Some people are sign spinners and some people, they're chemical engineers. People make choices. Equality means we own ourselves and we are not another person's slave. Equality means not that the incomes are equal, but that we all have an equal number of hours, 24 hours in a day. How are you going to spend that time? Are you going to spend it surfing and watching the games on the weekend, or getting up early and putting the real estate signs out in the morning? Some people are rich in leisure time, and some people are rich in material things. We make choices. Are there injustices? Yes. And that's what the government and lawyers are for. Can you be hit by lightning sometimes? Yes, that can happen too. But many people's income outcomes are due to their own choices. You can't have both be rich in leisure time and rich in material things. You have to make choices. And I'm not calling one lazy and one greedy, but I see that happening a lot in politics. People just make choices. So I'm on page 2, almost done. We can all be rich. One problem I have with the class warfare model and the Marxist model of the economy is that there's a lower class and an upper class, and the upper class will always have the upper hand, and there'll be income inequality, and it's a big zero-sum game. If I gain more, you have less. But that's not how prosperous economies work. We can all be rich. This is not a zero-sum game. If you're willing to go into advanced skilled fields, chemical engineering, pharmacy school, architecture, plant genetics, chemistry, you'll be rich. Instead, if you pick majors like the dog in cinema or banjo music of the 1800s, your market is more limited. You don't get to pick your major. The consumers have some say in that. In a voluntary commerce, commercial trade market, voluntary marketplace, you're free to pick a major with less demand, less consumer demand, but you're not going to be as wealthy as someone who can take a field and genetically engineer the plants in that field to grow when there's a drought-tolerant crops. Now, one problem Marxists have with an economy is that even though you can get skills, some people control the raw materials. And that's called the initial endowments problem, and maybe we can go into that later. Someone gets to the land first. Someone does get to the land first. They find the beachfront property in Malibu first. They find the farmland first. Too bad someone gets there first. They put a fence around it. When you're born, all the good stuff's taken. So what are you left to do? Develop skills. And when you have skills, you're just as valuable as the guy with the farm. Because if you can double the yield on that land, the farmer's better off, you're better off because you get food, and the consumers are better off because the price drops. So we can talk about the initial endowments problem. It's an unsolvable problem, but somebody gets there first. Does that mean you bump them off? Or do you just work with them in a peaceful way? To me, monopolization of land forces specialization. It forces people to develop better and better skills, and then the economy expands. Even though we have scarce resources, things get better. Speaking of things getting better, I just bought this. I hate that one-click feature on Amazon because you buy books. I just found a new book, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. And they talk about how life expectancy is increasing and malnutrition globally is falling. So even though we have more and more people on the planet, we don't have a Malthusian problem where it's just competition and we're all poor. We actually are doing better and better. Our computers, big, are getting thinner all the time and smaller. So we're getting more of the resources we have. We actually can invent new things. Van Jones, a Democrat, last week said that we live the American nightmare. It's a myth that we can all be rich. He's crying, boo-hoo-hoo. I'm sure he's well-intentioned. I know most of these people are, but they're profoundly misinformed on how an economy operates. We can all be rich. You have to pick a major that people want, not baton twirling, okay? You can pick those majors. I was told, you're being very mean to certain majors. I'm telling you, some of them are more marketable and valuable than others. That is the fact. So don't shoot the messenger. The Wall Street movement wants to tax the rich. I understand they want to go after the people who took bailouts, tax money to subsidize their failing businesses. I'm with them on that. But when they just blanket condemn all the rich, it just disturbs me. Frankly, people who go to med school, I went to the ER this weekend. My husband had fallen, said Parkinson's, and he fell and cut his lip. And the doctor was stitching him up, and she was on the phone about someone with epilepsy and using all this advanced technical doctor jargon, and I was loving it. I was just loving it. I love you. Will you marry me? So many hours given up every weekend, not just a few weekends a semester, every weekend, studying chemistry and anatomy for years to get to that point, and you want to take that all away from them? Remember, Marxists, you can't exploit people if they worked many hours to get those degrees unpaid for 10 or 20 years to get that neurosurgery degree. They need compensation for all that work. How dare you talk about how fortunate they are? Really? Fortunate? They sacrificed a lot. I'm almost done.
So funny.
Unconstrained democracy is not an admirable goal. An unconstrained majority is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. Some people work for a living, and some people vote for a living. So I'm not impressed with the calls for more democracy in the economy. Free trade is a human right. I decide who to hire to teach my child, to babysit, or teach them violin lessons. That is between me and someone else. No democracy vote.